Hello, everybody, and welcome along to, I suppose we'll call it the New Year's Eve edition of the Rebel Wild Ball. The festive season is on its way towards the departures lounge. I presume you're very sad by all of that. Can I ask you, would you do it again tomorrow? Well, whatever about whether you had a happy Christmas, whether I had a happy Christmas, the virus was extremely happy with our behaviour over the past number of weeks, to such a degree that it has really infiltrated through very many communities, right across the genders, right across the age groups. And I suppose it was inevitable that Micheál Martin was going to descend those 10 steps of the day, those Titanic steps as I call them, to bring more restrictive news our way. And, for the next couple of months, you can wipe out January and February. I would imagine, the 5 kilometres is back in business. And non-essential services are not allowed to operate. Schools, though, they have decided to close those for a couple of days. They will now reopen on the 11th. I thought that was a particularly good move insofar as it now gives an opportunity for, families all over the country to, I suppose, basically get their act together. And the 2 weeks will ensure that when schools will reopen on the 11th, that they'll be a lot safer than if they did next Wednesday. Anyway, if you open schools next Wednesday, I don't think there'll be very few people in there. There's a lot of staff that are now isolating because of being in close contact, or nearly at this stage, if we knew somebody that was in close contact. And, the peaks, the first peak, the second peak, probably struggling to know a number of people who had this particular disease. Well, that's not the case now. I'm sure that in every parish in Ireland you could list off families that have been visited by this particular disease. COVID-19 seemingly came into the World Health Organization, decided back on the 11th of February to give it that particular name. I think the CO part was for the corona, the VI was the virus, the D is for disease, and of course 19 because it was discovered, not too sure of the date, but certainly sometime back in 2019. I know that many of you will be hoping that 12 o'clock tonight can't come soon enough, that you wish the year out the back door and that you won't have to go through it again. But I think that we can't forget about all the lessons that we learned. And I know it was an incredibly difficult year for so many people, but there was lessons learned. Simple things like hospital appointments. And I'm sure one or two of you out there have visited hospitals and sat in waiting rooms with me with 20 or 30 other people, passing on infection, getting infection, stressful occasion, waiting for the door to open. See, was it your turn to be called in? There was another setup, those of you that ever had to go for a blood test. You went in and you got this number. It could be anything up to 50. And you know exactly what that meant, that 49 had to go before you. Now all of these clinics, you get your time, you go in there. No, there's only small detail. GP surgeries, Jesus, what a business-making operation. They must have been the waiting rooms. Whatever hope you had going in there, you certainly, you were creating business, I would imagine, for the operators. Such was the, if you like, unhygienic, unhealthy existence. You maybe sit in your car, get a phone call, come in. And they're only, small things, but I do think there was, a huge amount that we can learn. Remote working, what an incredible phenomenon that can turn out to be. I know it's not perfect at the moment, and I know probably some of you have 3 or 4 young people who work at home under the one roof, but in time, I think this will add enormously to the health of the nation and to the development and the maintenance of communities all over this country. If you can live in Ahiola for a company that's based in Dublin, look what that's going to do for that particular community. And people, there'll be this blended working, maybe a couple of days going into offices. And I've met 1 or 2 mothers, for example, that are absolutely thrilled with this. They can go down to the local primary school, pick up their children, and sure, that's a huge thing, maybe far more important than any kind of working. So, I think this is, that's another good that will come out of it. Did it teach us something about ourselves, maybe to appreciate the simple things of life? How many people realise that maybe that they don't have to go outside their own home or outside their own garden? Appreciate the little simple things and things you can get up to. And this whole staycation. I could never understand the name, but anyway, I think it taught a lot of us about the beauty that exists in this country, and up to then people had to fly off to these exotic spots to come home to be shown photographs on their mobiles of, a massive waterfall or something like that. All of these things are in this country. I think that all of that taught us several things. Funerals, for example, and look, I'm not trying to for one moment, lose sight of the fact that it has been difficult for families, but a lot of good has come out of it in terms of funerals. Even simple things like where neighbours stood out the side of the road, and the mourning family passing by could see that their neighbours were out there and showing support. I'll be honest with you, like I can't have a fair few funerals in my day. Probably lucky enough to end up going to my own. But anyway, you arrive at the funeral home, the first thing, I'm speaking only from a personal point of view, I know that the better people out there wouldn't think like this. The first thing that dawned on me is, oh my God almighty, the link to this queue. Is there any way I could skip it? Anyway, you rule that out and you push your way towards the mourners, then the handshake. You couldn't even talk because, if you think back in this now, if you saw a person talking up at the top of the queue, you'd be saying to yourself, would they ever move on? All of that is gone. Now you can go online, you can pay lovely tributes, or you can nearly pay any tribute. And I know of a funeral of a great character who died recently. I'm talking about a really great individual. And I think that the undertaker, and it's not finished yet, printed off 60 pages of tributes that came in. And I know that in time to come, when the family will read them, they'll get a full history of what this particular individual meant to society. And that applies to so many people. So I think we can even do funerals better in the future. I'm not saying that the crowd should be cut down, that families can't get in. But this crack of travelling 50 or 60 miles to funerals, queuing up, in with the handshake, out the gap. I think this new system is going to be so much better. I'd imagine that there's probably a lot more that you can think of. For example, the sporting organisations, the one that I would probably be closely associated with and having affinity with is the GAA. Like, how long were they losing sight of what they were all about? And it took a pandemic to sort them out. That we're now going to have a separate club in a county season. Incredible progress. And by God, it also taught us that too much democracy is probably not the greatest thing of all time. They were able to push things through. There was a time when, here in this county and every other county, with these county board delegates going into meetings. Sometimes I know that some of them did great work, but my God almighty, progress was so slow this year that things went through. They slapped them through. They were able to make decisions. They got the inter-county scene. They got rid of all these cups that we thought, oh my God, we'll never get rid of them. But anyway, so that's that. Donald is gone. Don't tell me that's a bad thing. Brexit is done. And for one, again, I know that that's going to be a challenge for a lot of companies, a lot of people. But look, I guarantee you in a couple of years' time, we'll get used to it. It'll be the new norm. Unforeseen consequences of these actions may take a while before we'll see things through. But look, the good thing, a deal was done. It not being done would have been an absolute disaster. I had to laugh somewhere this morning. Stanley Johnson, who do you think he is? Boris's father. This guy now is about 90 years of age, I think, and is he 80 or 90? But anyway, I'd say you're not too concerned. He voted to remain. He's now endeavouring to become a French citizen. I would imagine the French are absolutely thrilled with this. But anyway, his mother was born in France and he's kind of produced, it's a bit like the back breeding. For those who might be into equestrian matters, the back breeding is so important in stallions and fillies. But anyway, Stanley has produced that his mother was born in France. Her parents were very much French, so it would appear that the French are going to get a new citizen out of all of this. In terms of sport for the coming weekend, I suppose we'll get to that. We haven't any Gaelic games here, but the world of soccer is really taking off in terms of Premier League for those of you that are interested in all of that. The situation, like the greatest rivalry of probably our generation, and when we look across the waters, the rivalry between Liverpool and Manchester United. And I don't know at times how Manchester United are only 3 points behind Liverpool and having a game less played, but that's the way it is. United take on Villa, that's tomorrow evening. Villa, who've had a good season, they're in 5th place. The only thing a little bit disappointing from a Cork point of view that Conor Howland doesn't seem to be getting his game at the moment. But United, they were playing Wolves the other night, and they got, the winner, Marcus Rashford got the winner, I think, in the 92nd minute. Seemingly the last time that was the latest winner. And if we go back to 2009, September 2009, seemingly when Michael Owen got one against Manchester City, the score then was 3-3 before Owen struck. So that brought great joy, obviously, to United fans. On Saturday then, we've got Spurs versus Leeds, and Spurs game with Fulham postponed during the week, again, the coronavirus affecting sport there. They play Leeds, and Leeds are back in business after getting a bit of hiding in one of their matches, but they beat West Bromwich Albion 5-0. And for Sam Allardyce, it has been a week of mixed emotions. By the way, he called for the league to be adjourned for a couple of weeks. Well, he didn't have the same look as the president of the INTO, who convinced the government to postpone the opening of schools by 3 days. But anyway, that was that particular match. Arsenal, are they making a bit of a revival? Is there a bit of a revival going on? They beat Brighton recently 1-0. So they play West Bromwich Albion, as I say, who were second from the bottom, and they'll be hoping to recover from that heavy defeat, despite the fact that they drew with Liverpool. Leicester, then we go to Sunday. No, there's a whole series of other games, but we picked the main ones, I suppose, from our perspective. Leicester are in 3rd place to play Newcastle, and United fans would be delighted with Newcastle's latest game last night when they drew with Liverpool. Then Chelsea, who are in 6th place, they drew with Aston Villa last time around, and Frank Lampard, their manager, he doesn't seem to be the most popular of guys, at least on this side of the water, getting a lot of stick. And playing Man City, who are in 8th place, their game with Everton was also postponed. And then Monday night, the big game again is Liverpool versus Southampton. And after 2 draws, Liverpool fans, and I know there's a huge amount of you out there, will be hoping that they'll get a win rather than a draw. And then if you really have nothing to be thinking about, seemingly on Sunday the 19th of September, it's the big game at Anfield between Manchester United and Liverpool. So that's, if you like, that's something to look forward to. In rugby, we obviously missed the big game last weekend. Well, not missed it because it didn't take place. That was the game between Munster and Leinster. There was an outbreak and it affected a number of the Leinster players. But this weekend, there are 2 games involving the Irish Promises in the Pro 14. You've got Ulster playing Munster. That game Saturday at 5:15. Both of these teams are unbeaten in this competition, even though that Ulster are out of the European one, which is a big disappointment to them. So I think that, like a lot depends on what players are allowed to play, and some of them are being rested, and Leinster will play Connacht then also Saturday evening at 7:30. However, it hasn't been the greatest of in the veer for the rugby fraternity, with I suppose this mass action now that's going on. The big story was Steve Thompson, who won a World Cup with England back in 2003, and now we can't remember it, early dementia. And seemingly a huge number of players. See, that was really the start of the professional era. And, obviously things weren't right now, whether they're right now or not, but it's a big question mark, like for the whole of the rugby scenario. Like there's a 30-year-old player involved in this, and they're taking their action against the English Rugby Union, the Welsh Rugby Union, the World Rugby Union. Now, I don't think it's going to succeed, because for it to succeed, I think that these unions would have to be proved that they knowingly allowed players to play in situations that would cause this to happen. But it's incredibly sad. I saw somewhere where a recent Irish rugby international who was, in action only a couple of years ago, recently retired, he forgot during the week or somewhere that he couldn't remember where his phone was, and all of a sudden it dawned on him, is this happening to me next? So yeah, I think that And like, I suppose a lot of sports have this situation with concussion. Like, we've seen a bit of it in Gaelic games as well. So it's a big concern, I would imagine, for the rugby fraternity. So basically, that's our final broadcast, if you like, of this particular year. We started this, I suppose, a bit of crack, maybe a bit of vanity and self-importance. But I would imagine too, as well, a little persuasion from one or two people that convinced us that we should endeavour in this sort of activity. Sure, it was a bit of crack. I enjoyed it. I'd like to thank each and every one of you that, you know, you might have watched it or listened to it and made a few comments on it. We may continue on, but that's for another day. All that remains now for me is to, you know, wish you all the best, you know, and thanks so many of you who've been really part of my journey over the past 12 months, adding great entertainment, whether it was by interacting like this or telephone conversations anytime we made up. So I'd like to thank you for that. Recently, somebody asked me that there was a bit of an article done in a respectable newspaper who would like to meet underneath the mistletoe. Well, I thought there was only one answer. I didn't care what the gender was, to be quite honest with you, once the said person was in possession of a needle with the vaccine in it. So with that in mind, you know, stay safe, stay well, and please God, those of us that I don't always find out whether we're allowed to get the vaccine or not, that we will, and that 2021 will be a really good year for all of us. Thanks again for watching and listening.